It was so great to catch up with Matt Gaunitz in this interview. Matt is a bugler with the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. In this video, we covered a lot of ground, including his day-to-day activities in the band, and also we discussed the upcoming trumpet audition with the prelims in March and the finals in May. Stick around to the end because Matt breaks down each of the prelim excerpts. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to comment below, and Matt and I would love to get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Really honored to have Matt Gaunitz with us today with the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. He's a bugler in the Corps, and looking forward to his visit. And also today we're going to talk a lot about the upcoming audition. It's a premier band gig, and we'll get into more of that in a little bit, but really, really exciting to get Matt's insight on both his job and what they're looking for in trumpet candidates. So Matt, I've known Matt for a little over a decade, I think. In fact, at one point, I think I tried to, push him into come and study with me at Arkansas State, and it's like New England Conservatory, Arkansas State, so it worked out really well for him, regardless. And just really happy for Matt and what he's been able to accomplish in his career. And Matt, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me this morning. Don't discredit yourself there. I heard Chris play at a recital at ITG in Georgia. I think it was 2012, something like that. It was just absolutely blown away and floored by the sound, which is why I started looking at Arkansas State, because man, I got to learn to sound like this guy.
Oh, Matt, you're too kind. You're too kind. Well, awesome to have you. Like I said, let's get into it. Matt, so just kind of a day in the life of what your life is like in the Army Old Guard, and just, take it from there if you would.
Sure. So probably the most common question we get, when someone asks us what our job's like is, what's a normal day look like for you guys? And, it sounds like a cop-out, but there is no normal day for us. Every day is a little bit different. Our schedules are extremely varied, and sort of don't have any real rhythm to them. So like this week, for instance, on Monday morning, we had a full core PT session. So PT is physical training, pretty important thing in the military. And we had a full PT session with the regimental commander that morning. And that's just something we do sometimes when our senior leaders want to kind of get to know the troops that they're leading. They'll come in and they'll do things like that just to build some camaraderie and get to know them. So Monday morning I had that right away at 6:30. So I was in the building by 6 a.m. Actually, I was there a little bit earlier because I usually try and get a little practice in before that, but, depends on the day. After that, I grabbed a little breakfast. I had a rehearsal at 9 o'clock. I had a practice session at 10 just for myself. Another rehearsal at 11. And then I was out of the building by noon on Monday. So there are days where super early, but I'm out super early as well. There are other days where I might not have to be to work until 4 o'clock in the afternoon for a evening mission. So when we go and play a gig somewhere, we call them missions, right? So the military dynamic there. So I might go play a show at like a basketball game or like an evening community event or something like that. There are other days where I'm there all day. Show up at 6, don't get to go home until 7 or 8 that night. There are days where we occasionally have to do 24-hour tours of duty. So occasionally I end up having to do that as well. So extremely varied.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Matt, for interrupting. So along those lines, so how do you know your schedule for the week prior? Do you call a tape, or how does that work?
So these days where everything's online, which is really nice. It used to be where we would have to go into work and there'd be a physical board in our office where all the information was on, and you would just have to take a picture of that almost every day or every week just to see what your week was going to look like, what your next week, and that was always projected 4 months out. these days, with everything digital, everything's on Google Calendar for us, which makes it super convenient. So I can see my personal schedule right next to my work schedule. And generally speaking, they do a pretty good job of letting us know these are going to be my next 2 weeks. So I have a pretty good idea of, like, not much is probably going to change. I mean, it sometimes does, but the big things are probably going to stay put. And then small things will go around them. Bigger things like trips, things where we're going to have to travel for a period of time, we generally know that at least a month, sometimes 2 months out, which is really helpful for planning.
Gotcha. Very good. Thanks for that insight. So really, every week's a little bit different. You're not going to be doing the same thing each and every week, and each and every day even. So it's sort of a day-to-day schedule a little bit that you can sort of plan, but not always. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a very fair way to put it. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Switching gears just a little bit. I know when I was in the band, and all these DC bands, when you win that position, you're in for some amazing gigs and memories. And, a couple that stick out to me from my time in the band was, playing Ronald Reagan's funeral and Obama's first inauguration and the inaugural balls that went down that night that we got to play at. And, what else? The Queen of England came in 2008. Those are just a few of my memories. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the cool things that you've gotten to see and do as part of a member of this great group?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, right up there with some of the cool things that we get to do is a lot of travel. We travel all over the country. And then internationally most years. Since COVID, we haven't quite come back from that yet. But there was a period of time where the Corps was traveling, doing one big international trip every year. So we've been to Basel, Switzerland. We've been to Norway. We went to Ottawa, Canada, for one of their international tattoos a few years ago. That's a trip that I personally got to go on. So, big things like that. Otherwise, just getting to see a lot of the country. I mean, I've traveled more since I've been in the group since, with the rest of my life combined before that. And I did drum and bugle corps, so that was a lot of traveling as well. So it's been really fantastic. Some highlights for me have been like going to San Antonio. That's always a really fun trip for our group. It's something that most people in the organization look forward to, just in terms of the city and the missions we get to do there and that sort of thing. Most recently, we went to Savannah, and we were just supporting like a local VFW ceremony down there, but they hosted us and treated us very well, and we just had a great time, even with the tropical storm that was blowing through. So we had some rainy days, but it was great.
Yeah.
Locally, things like I played at the last presidential inauguration, which was great. Really a different experience. I mean, as you know, Chris, those are long days, but very rewarding and kind of special. And then just going to the White House is always kind of a surreal experience. This year we had the opportunity to go and support the White House holiday tours. For anyone that isn't familiar, people can sign up every year and tour the White House, which is a cool thing that a lot of people take advantage of. But this year they had a lot of musical support, and so we were able to go and play holiday tunes as people kind of went in, and that was a really fun experience.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing those. Very cool. In case you missed it, there is an audition coming up. It looks like March 9th is when the packets are due. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. We have the live rounds if you're invited, May 4th through 5th. It's a 2-day situation, and starting salary, this keeps getting better and better, 73 to 78,000, depending on, I would assume, dependents and that sort of thing. And here's the email as well. So, but we'll break that down a little bit more, including at the end. Stick around, because we're going to talk about the prelim excerpts and some of the things that that the audition committee might be looking for. So I think that'll be beneficial for you all. So I want you to discuss, Matt, if you would, some of the benefits of being in the military. I just mentioned salary a little bit. It's a very, very good salary. And in addition to that, just other benefits that are included in the whole package here.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the salary, like you said, that's absolutely depending on whether you're married, have children, that sort of thing. So, if you're just a single individual, your starting salary would be that 73, and then if you have dependents, it's just up from there, depending. So, I mean, in our industry, trying to be a professional musician, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
The other cool things, we're guaranteed 30 days paid vacation a year. Sometimes finding time to take that vacation can be a little bit challenging, but, our personal command and our leadership is fantastic about getting people the time that they need. Our particular organization, when it comes to taking leave and time off, is first come, first served. So, it's not seniority based. So if you want a day off in 6 months, you put it on the calendar and you're the first one. So it's really fair and equitable. Trying to use that time as well, which is I really appreciate and enjoy. Otherwise, the full standard military, medical, dental, any kind of care that you might need, is going to be covered and you're going to be taken care of. Which is, again, if you're a little bit older, you're out of school, you've been freelancing, trying to make a go of it, how expensive and difficult that stuff can be and stressful, honestly. So having all of that kind of taken, off my plate. When I got the military gig, because I got in kind of late. I mean, I didn't get in until 29. So, I was out there trying to cobble together a living and driving all the way across, states and all the things that we do to make ends meet. So it was such a incredible, refreshing thing to oh, I can just do this one job now if I want. I don't have to, constantly be looking for that next thing or, worried about how I'm going to pay my rent or my mortgage next month. So, I would say those are huge. So the other thing in our industry, especially, as COVID showed us, is, work can be, there one day, gone the next. And so I would say the job security is honestly probably one of the biggest benefits of really any of the military bands. But, ours is in there as well. If another worldwide pandemic hits or some disaster, God forbid, you're still going to have a job. So I think that's been pretty huge as well, and something a lot of us, feel very grateful for on a daily basis.
Awesome. And also, can you speak to the education benefits as well, maybe GI Bill, et cetera?
Sure thing. Yeah. So you also have access to the post 9/11 GI Bill, which basically is substantially reduced education, money for education. So if you're in the service and you want to take advantage of getting another degree or getting a certification or something like that, that's money that's set aside for you to use to help defray the cost of that. Depending on the degree and the institution, it might not cover all of it, but it's going to be it's going to be extremely reduced, which is fantastic. The other benefit that you can take advantage of is if you have a family, say you're good, you don't want any more education, you're done with school, but you get married, you can pass those educational benefits off to your spouse and they can use them. Or if you have children down the road, you can pass your benefits to your kids. And so really it's not just for you, but it's something that, your entire family can take advantage of if that's something you choose to do. So that's another huge perk as well.
That's awesome. I'm actually, I actually benefit from these benefits, education benefits. My daughter is a freshman in college, and she's on Chapter 35. It's called Dependent Education Assistance, and it's really nice to have that for all of my kids, and so grateful for that. And I know that, I went to I got my doctorate on the GI Bill while I was in the service, and you're right, it was just very limited expense, and that's what a benefit that is. And even when you separate, right, Matt, you're still eligible. If you only do a 4-year enlistment, it's my understanding, I don't want to pass bad information, but it's my understanding that you can still use the education benefit after you've separated. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you separate, so you do your initial contract and you decide the lifestyle is not for you, and a lot of people do that, and it's totally okay. You've earned those benefits. Like they are yours to use. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. When they get out, they think, oh, I'm just out. Now, don't have anything I can take advantage of anymore. But there's a ton of resources available to you if you do, even just one, we call it a tour of duty, even just one contract. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And like Chris said, he worked towards his doctorate. We had someone in the organization recently complete their doctorate while they were in. And though that's not an easy thing to do as far as time commitment and scheduling, that sort of advanced education can be completed, while doing this job. So that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very, very cool. All right. Going back to the audition flyer here. So March 9th. So I also have instructions here on the application. If you check it out, and I'll put in the description below, I'll put all these links in here. But this has all of the requirements, and as we look through here, looks like requirements are due by March 9th. Do you want to speak to any of this, Matt?
Sure. So there's a lot of information in that packet, and please read the packet. I think possibly one of the number one biggest disqualifiers in these sort of things, and this isn't just for us, it's for any military band and really any ensemble that you might apply to, is they didn't follow the instructions, and they missed important information, or they submitted things incorrectly, and that might be a disqualifying factor. So just read through the information. Everything you need to know is there in terms of requirements for application, requirements for doing the job. Check out the general qualifications; those are important. And then on the next page, so make sure you read through, you check all those details off on the application list there. And just, double, triple check your packet before you submit it to make sure you're happy with it, first and foremost, but then also that it is complete upon initial submission. So that's, I think, the most important thing.
Great. And, in a minute, we're going to dive into the music a little bit for the prelims, but just in general, what are some things that you all are looking for in a recruit or somebody who's a candidate for this position?
Right. So aside from you have to be eligible to join the military is sort of something that we can't control. You have to be able to, backing up. So we'll come back to the pre-screen information in a minute. But say you submit your pre-screen information and we decide to invite you to the live round. At that point, you end up working with an Army recruiter. So you're going to go to your local recruiting command, and you're going to start working with them about getting all the preparatory things done. So that means you're going to have to be cleared and eligible to join the military. So you'll go to your recruiter. They'll take you to MEPS, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station. And basically, they just do a full medical workup, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure there are no disqualifying factors. So
you get to walk around like a duck, all right? You get to walk around like a duck. Do you remember that little exercise at MEPS? Yeah. Anyway,
it's a long day, but once you do that, you're qualified, and then you're good to go to attend our live audition. So those are sort of the big things, right, that we can't control. Because if MEPS doesn't qualify you, there's nothing we can do, or any military band can really do about it. You can try and appeal, but they sort of have the last word in terms of eligibility. So yeah, that's the big thing. Beyond that, when you get to us, so like for your pre-screen tape, we're looking for the same things that any professional musical organization is looking for. I mean, the three big pillars, right? We want you to sound great. We want you to play with good time and good rhythm. And we need you to play with good pitch, right? So, you know, that's no different from anybody else. Something that, you know, my personal thing is sound. You know, every committee member sort of has their own list of priorities and what they value most. And again, that's the case with any any audition you're ever going to take. So your panel is going to have different priorities. But for me, like, sound is the most important thing. If you have a super compelling sound, it's just like, yeah, it grabs my attention. I'm more often gonna, you know, let other things slide a little bit because I'm just like, I'm so compelled. I forget who said it, but there was a famous trumpet player that said that a beautiful sound can cover a multitude of sins. I don't know if that was like Jens.
I don't know who that is.
Someone like that.
Yeah.
But so those are the big things. Like, you got to have those three things. And beyond that, if you're doing those, we want a compelling musical message, right? So if you look at our pre-screen stuff, like the Charlier 6, for instance, nobody wants to hear it like perfectly metronomically precise in the box and kind of boring. We want to hear those fundamental skills, and then we want to hear you do something with it and just really express. So I think those are the big things, you know, just the MEPS eligibility component, and then for us getting through the pre-screen, just like great fundamental skills, and then just singing through the horn.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice on, you know, in your guys' case, it's not just audio, it's a video as well. Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight on recording that, and you know, what about the idea of nuance to that? Obviously, there's no editing, but do you have any insight on that?
Yeah. So, you know, it's pretty common to see a wide variety of videos. You know, some people are recording in a dorm room. Some people are recording in beautiful churches. Excuse me. It's super important to get into the best space that you can get into. You know, I realize that not everyone has access to gorgeous spaces and amazing equipment, but you don't need that. You just need, you know, you just need your video camera. It could be your cell phone. You know, your average iPhone these days has a fantastic camera. And then get yourself like a decent like Zoom recorder, something like that, something that's going to capture your sound relatively accurately. You know, and that's it. So all we want to hear is the best effort that you can put forth. You know, not someone that's, you know, recording their audio on their phone in, I don't know, a super reverberant hallway or stairwell where we can't really hear anything. So, I mean, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think a live space is tremendously important. And you would think that most people could get to a live space, or at least reserve a place to record these excerpts. And that's that might give you the best shot at having a really, really good recording, wouldn't you say, Matt?
I would, yeah. And I mean, every committee's, you know, we're always going to try, and we're always going to be as fair as possible in how we're evaluating. But you know, if it appears like you didn't make an effort to make yourself presentable, make your product presentable, even if you're recording in your bedroom because that's all you have, if your bedroom's messy, you know, or the space you're in is messy or something like that, you know, it doesn't really reflect well on you as a candidate. And it makes it a little bit harder to take your submission seriously when you haven't taken care of those extra details, because they are really important. So, you know, sounding great, but then just putting together a professional presentation. Like, for me, this is my personal practice studio. And, you know, if I had to record in here, that would be fine. Like, it would just be a super dry recording, but I would make it sound as good as I possibly could. And I would make sure that all the details in the background are reasonably tidy. So those are probably the biggest things.
Great insight. Yeah, appreciate that. So I'm going to go back to this slide here. So if you pass the pre-screen, obviously the live audition is May 4th and 5th, and so you guys have it spread out over 2 days. Now, approximately how many people do you expect to be at the live round on May 4th and 5th? I'm sure it depends, but just kind of a ballpark.
Yeah, super depends on the number of tapes we get, and then just how many people that the committee feels were qualified. But I would say we average 5 to 10 candidates for audition. 10 being the extreme high end. Like, rarely do we have that many, but there isn't really a limit to how many people we can invite. It just depends on how many people the committee thought played at a high enough level in their tape to qualify for the audition.
Gotcha. So those candidates that are invited to the live audition, is there some sort of reimbursement for travel or anything like that, Matt, that you guys offer?
There is. Yeah. So especially for the civilian side, because active duty military can also apply. Anyone can send in a tape, but you're going to get your travel expenses covered. So you're going to work with your recruiter. You're going to go through maps, and then if all that is good, then your recruiter is going to set up your travel. So they're going to book your flight, they're going to book your hotel, and you might have to cover like your food or things like that. But the major travel expenses are going to be covered. So it's essentially a free audition. So
wow.
How many of those do we get to take?
That's fantastic. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Like I mentioned, we're going to break down the prelim music in just a little bit. But Matt, I want to talk about what those 2 days look like at the live rounds. Maybe dive in a little deeper. In addition to the music performing and all that, there's some other elements that take place in this audition, correct, Matt?
There are. Yeah, so if I was to break down a typical 2-day audition process, and each one kind of varies depending on the schedule of the unit, what we have going on. We always like to combine the audition with a ceremony so that the candidates can come and see what we do. Just
that's
watch
awesome.
a ceremony, which is, it's hugely beneficial to have some context. But yeah, to break it down, so usually on day one, right away in the morning, you're going to report. They'll give you your time. They'll give you your dress code. Nothing super formal. Usually it's just khakis, a polo, and a pair of comfortable shoes, because we want you to be comfortable, but also sort of professional. But yeah, so you're going to come, you're going to do a height weight assessment just to make sure okay, you're good to go. No issues here. And then the command team, so our commander, our first sergeant, sergeant major, whoever might be available, is going to welcome the candidates, wish everyone well, and just put sort of faces to names kind of thing. And then you're going to have time to warm up. You're going to have your first playing assessment, which is, exactly like any other audition. They're going to give you the repertoire. We want you to play these 3-4 excerpts. The committee will deliberate. Then they'll decide if anyone's cut from that first round. Then you'll have lunch, come back. You'll then work with one of our drum majors on learning our marching style a little bit, and then sort of teaching you a really simple marching routine. It's usually just marking time for a certain number of counts, marching forward, turning around, marching back. Super simple. They just want to know that, how do you look? Can you memorize something, pretty straightforward, something that's really indicative of, what we do all the time on jobs. And then you're going to get an introduction to our instrument. For those that don't know, we play a 2-valve bugle. And it's a super unique instrument. It's the only one of its kind, but it's in B flat, same as your B flat trumpet. So you can prep on your B flat, and it'll translate pretty well in that regard. The big thing is we do play it with our thumbs. So our first valve is with our right thumb, and then our second valve is with our left. So getting used to that is a big part of why we introduce you to the instrument before we expect you to play it in a round. So you get some time, you get to take it with you and figure it out. So that's kind of that's kind of the first afternoon. There may or may not be a standing assessment on the first day. We have you stand for 30 minutes, both at attention and parade rest. They show you how to do that. This freaks a lot of people out. Like, I heard I have to stand like for a long time. And to be fair, like, it's not bad. You know, just do it a couple times in your preparation. And all we want to see is that you can do it without passing out or falling over. It's not scary. It's weird because a lot of people are looking at you, but it's no big deal. So, you know, for anyone that might stress out about seeing that, don't worry about it. When you get out of basic training, especially, you'll be able to stand for hours. It's no big deal.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Going on to the second day, you're going to get a marching refresher in the morning with our drum major. Just like, hey, just a reminder, this is what we're doing. They're going to look at you, give you some feedback. Then we're going to have a marching assessment. So for the committee, they're going to watch you do that little routine that you just learned. They're going to see how you look. Again, we're not looking for someone that like just perfectly does our style right away. Like we can teach that. We're just looking for someone who's reasonably well coordinated, who can do the things, in that we know will be teachable, right? Because we have a long training process. After that, you're going to have your next performance assessment. So you're going to play your next round. So effectively like the semifinal playing round. Then some lunch. Then after that, you know, you're going to go to the final round where you're going to have another marching assessment where you're going to be marching and playing at the same time. And that'll be a memorized piece of music with that same marching routine that you've already learned. And then you're going to play with our section. And just some of our standard material. And same thing as any other section round for any other audition. We just want to know, like, you know, how do you blend? Do you blend? Do you match with our section? Is how you play going to work with us? The normal stuff. Then beyond that, it's just an interview where, you know, they'll sit down, they'll talk to you, ask you some questions, and then they'll make their determinations. So that's effectively how our audition usually runs.
Yeah, that's a comprehensive audition. I mean, obviously the playing part gets you in the door, but there's other elements that you have to do, including an interview, because a lot of times in auditions, that's not really part of it necessarily. And so I think that's fantastic, and that you guys sort of know what you're getting from the get-go, which it sounds like it's a very well-crafted audition from my perspective. So very cool.
I mean, I will say, for us, like the person that we're going to be working with is extremely important. We spend a lot of time together. We travel a lot. Something that's a little bit different for us, different for us than I think the majority of the other bands, is we do a lot more traveling. So we're just together a lot more in a lot more weird situations. And so it's good to know who's going to be on your left and your right. And then our job is a lot more visual than most of the other bands, just in terms of the way we perform. You know, we're very distinctive. You know, we perform in the colonial style uniform, representing that time in history. So, you know, visually, there's just a lot more to grab onto. And so that's something that is extremely important in our selection process as a result. So.
Yeah, great information. And if you've never seen the Old Guard perform, it's absolutely impressive. Check it out; they're everywhere. It really is a really, really great unit as far as military bands go, and in general. And you guys are hiring fantastic musicians, you know, from the conservatory and beyond. And it's just awesome that you guys. The gig that you guys have, I know how grateful you are. There's no perfect job, of course, but this is what an opportunity for someone. Absolutely. Well, hey, let's jump in. Let me pull up the prelim audition music here, and let's dive into it. You kind of mentioned Charlier 6 a little bit ago, sort of this. You know, being very, very expressive on this one, it seems like to me, is your chance to really show your soloistic side and expressive side, and maybe having a good framework with the rhythm underneath, but from there, it's got to be just really, this is your chance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This Charlier, right? We all know Charlier. We all play Charlier. It's expression within that framework. So for the Charlier 6, I mean, that's what I'm listening for. I'm listening to what you bring to the table musically. Making sure that you're not doing anything crazy. To be more specific, I guess, like making sure that you're not, playing rhythms and things that aren't on the page. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got in terms of excerpt and etude preparation for auditions was from Tony Prisk, who's the second trumpet of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And he once told me, if it's not on the page, don't do it. Like, do what's on the page. Don't add things, don't subtract things, because it makes a committee feel comfortable. Our audition is a little bit unique because everyone on the committee is a trumpet player, so we know the repertoire, we know how it goes, we know the isms of the instrument. But most auditions you're going to play, you're going to have, wind players and string players and, all kinds of different musicians that don't know this repertoire. So don't, if you're doing what's on the page, it makes people feel comfortable with your ability to follow the directions given. So that being said, we want that expression beyond that. So really, what am I trying to say?
Sounds like you're trying to say that there is freedom, but it has to make sense, I think, is kind of what you're trying to say, because, if the rhythm is wacky and the rubato is off, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Then it makes the listener squirm in their chairs a little bit, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Freedom and expression within the framework of what you've been given, I guess, is a much more concise way to put that.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good information. Yeah, let's move on to the next excerpt here, Matt. Looks like a march.
Yeah, so the Barber Commando March, right? Another super standard piece of repertoire that you're going to see on a lot of military band auditions. And, I think what we're all looking for on this is time, really clear, precise time. Your treatment of the dotted 8/16ths is incredibly important, making sure that you're not rushing through them. Da 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 da. Making sure you're metronomic with that. And then sound. This is your chance to make a really bold statement. So for me, like this sort of excerpt, this isn't my wheelhouse. This is where I'm just like, yeah, I could play. Because I know sound is one of my strengths. So this is always good for me. So if you think your time is one of your great strengths, but your sound is a little less so, you're less happy with it, this is a great opportunity to kind of work on that. So yeah, and then just the same things, making sure the pitch is there, you've got a lot of accidentals, things like that. And then, the rhythm at the end, especially dun da 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 dun da 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 dee, that sort of thing, making sure we're not rushing. So I would say sound and rhythm are the two huge things that you want to bring to this excerpt. And then just like this compelling, exciting quality. And if you listen to any recording of this, that's the other thing. Find recordings. In this day and age, post-COVID, there are recordings of virtually everything on YouTube now, thanks to people like Chris Smith and Jim Wilt and Jack Burt and, militarytrumpetjobs.com. Phenomenal resources with phenomenal recordings that you can reference for all of these things.
Yeah. Fantastic. And also, we didn't mention this, and I'm sure this is in the application instructions. B flat trumpet on all of these, or what's the situation with that, Matt?
I think you're okay using B flat or C.
Okay.
That's my opinion on that. There's nothing wrong with using a C trumpet. I think most people are going to come at this playing C. Well, most, master students, professionals, maybe some undergrads are going to come at this stuff playing C trumpet. I know I play everything except the bugle calls on C trumpet. So that's what I would do.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what about cornet for the march? If it doesn't specify here necessarily, but I guess I guess that's probably not something you want to do, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically what it says, but I would avoid cornet. Just play, if you're going to play B flat anything, just play B flat trumpet, and feel comfortable to use your C, but nothing else, I think, for this.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that. Let's go on to the next excerpt. It looks like we have the bugle calls here. You want to talk about those a little bit, Matt?
Sure. So bugle calls are so they're seemingly simple, pieces of music for the most part. You look at them and don't really think a lot of them usually, or at least that's what I thought before I got into the military. But then you start digging into sort of the distinct character and style that you play bugle calls, and it becomes something else. So Tattoo, for instance, it's the longest bugle call that we have. It's all about consistency. We want you to have the same sound from the first C to that last E. And it's just a bold, ringing sort of sound. There are no dynamics, but you just want to think like a nice forte. Bum 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 ba bum ba bum bim bum 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 ba bum bum bim bum bee, and just do what's on the page. Really buoyant, really declarative style. And think about what a bugle call signifies. What was a bugle call used for, right? They initially back, in the period, the Civil War, Revolutionary War, bugle calls and things of that nature were used as communication tools on battlefields, right? Sound retreat, attack, when the military was in camp, when to eat, when to go to church, when to wake up, when to go to bed. All of these things were communicated through signals and bugle calls, whether they be bugles or drums or fifes or, whatever it was during the time. You're communicating something, right? So bold, declarative, communicating that message, whatever it might be. So I would encourage you to go, I believe they're still there, but on one of I think the Army Band, the Pershing Zone website, I think, they still have all of the bugle calls available to listen to, like recordings of all of them, played by the great Woody English, who probably not a lot of people know anymore, but he was a phenomenal trumpet player in the Pershing Zone Army Band for many years, and he recorded all of them. So check those out for references. You can also find them on YouTube, things like that. But as far as learning the style, that's the best thing you can possibly do. Because if you come in and the committee says, that's how it goes, that's the best compliment you could possibly be given. Regarding taps, kind of switching gears here, obviously bold and declarative is not something that you might use to describe how you would play taps. Taps can be deeply personal. Everybody sort of develops their own style and their own way that they like to phrase it. But the same thing on this, I would say, for the Charlier, is make sure that you're working within the framework that you've been given, right? Nobody wants to hear the fermatas, like 10 seconds of a fermata or anything like that. It should flow naturally and musically. Your dotted 8/16 should be clear, not snappy, da, 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 like that kind of thing. Perfectly acceptable, just beautiful. We just want to hear beauty. Obviously, you're playing a lot of open intervals, so we want the pitch to be right. We don't want any super flat E's and sharp G's and the C's somewhere lost in the middle. So just make sure you're doing this with like a drone. Same thing with Tattoo. Use a drone. Set it, check where those intervals are, and just make sure that it's all correct. Because if it's correct, you will set yourself apart. There are going to be a lot of people that submit tapes, and you listen to it, and it's not right. And it's clear that the candidate either wasn't able to, wasn't capable of doing that, of playing with that level of intonation yet, which happens. If you're a young player, you're trying to figure it out, you're trying to learn. It's great to do these things because you learn so much from it. But when we're listening, we need all those things to be in place. We need that pitch to be rock solid. so that it doesn't distract from your musical presentation. So the bugle calls, I think that's the most important thing because, there's no valves, right? It's just all those open, perfect fourths, fifths, thirds, things like that. So yeah, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, Matt, that was great, and I especially appreciated what you said about taps and that it's deeply personal. And so I think when you think military, you go into taps has to be played a certain way. And I sounded taps at Arlington Cemetery for several years there, and not one person played taps the exact same. And they were all a little bit different. And I think it's important for the candidates to know that that's okay, but it has to be, like you mentioned, within that framework. One question I get asked a lot when I'm working with students auditioning for military bands is, can you use vibrato on taps? And I'm like, yes, you can use vibrato. Absolutely. It's very, very expressive, right? Is that kind of how you guys look at it as well, Matt?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't speak for everybody who might be listening to these tapes, but for myself, I just want to hear great expression. Again, sound is my top priority when I'm listening to someone play. I want to hear them sound great, and I want to hear just beautiful expression. And whatever that means to you, especially in terms of something like taps, the more authentically you can play. Yeah, I think that's another thing I want to bring up real quick, just across the entire list, and really any audition you might take. I think especially when you're a younger player. And even not so young, you can run into a situation where you're trying to figure out what a committee wants to hear. What do they want me to sound like? And that's never going to work out because a committee or just anyone listening to you can tell when you're not being authentic, can tell when you're trying to do something that isn't you. And I think it's really, really important to make sure that you're bringing just whatever you feel is the way that you want to express this to the table, because that will come through in a recording, believe it or not.
Fantastic information. Thanks, Matt. So if you want to comment in the comments below, Matt and I would be happy to get back to you. I'm certain of it. And if you have any other questions about the upcoming audition or just auditions in general, we're happy to help. And I really appreciate you all tuning in. Matt, any final thoughts before we head off here?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again for having me. I love talking about stuff. I love auditions. Believe it or not, I still take a number of auditions. Helps keep me improving and stay sharp and things like that. And so I love talking about this stuff. If someone wants to reach out to me personally with questions about the old guard or anything really, they can reach out to me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. My personal email is just mgaunitz, so M and my last name at Gmail. Anyone's more than welcome to reach out directly. They have something to ask that they don't want to post publicly or whatever it might be. So.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks so much, Matt. And hopefully we can catch up soon and maybe even do some playing together at some point here.
That'd be amazing. That'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. Appreciate you being with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris.